Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Wednesday, September 24th, 2025. And yesterday, Donald Trump went to the United Nations and they messed around with him and his escalator and they messed around with his teleprompter and they made an error in doing these things, I feel. So Tylenol when pregnant, Tylenol says, Trump's right, actually. It's been long-standing advice. We had to get in the DeLorean to go back and look when Tylenol started talking about not using Tylenol while pregnant. And yesterday, unbelievably, there are a whole bunch of women on TikTok taking Tylenol because Trump said you shouldn't take Tylenol because it might cause autism for your child. That is not stable or sane behavior. That's an insane thing to do. Holy cow. What else? Trump on the green agenda. He went to the United Nations and he said, what is the United Nations supposed to do? Like stop wars? I stopped 7 wars in the last 7 months or something like that. And he names all the wars. The United Nations didn't do anything at all. What do you guys do here exactly? Like, and then he talks about the green agenda and he talks about, a whole bunch of stuff. So we've got a whole bunch of that to talk about as well. Facebook and Google were proven, the big bombshell yesterday was that Google was proven to have been the one to censor during the Biden years. And so this is going to be a big deal. And apparently YouTube is going to be giving people back their channels. And YouTube is still really, really censored. Yesterday, Greg and I tweeted about this. Greg and I had something like almost 400 viewers simultaneously or something like that. And YouTube had 43. They were all, I guess, all the viewers were on X, right? But like Facebook had no viewers. Twitch has no viewers, right? Rumble has 3 viewers. YouTube has 10 viewers. So it's all very, very censored. They can say, oh yeah, we're done with that censorship stuff now. But in Canada, it's still very, very censored. So it's pretty wild stuff going on. And the gun seizure payout list was published. And so we'll look at the guns and all of the ridiculousness because privately, the public safety minister knows that the gun seizure plan's not going to work. And publicly, they're ramming it through anyway because it was a campaign promise or something like that. I don't know. It doesn't make any rational sense, but nothing these days makes any rational sense. There's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we've got to start with the ostriches. Of course, we have to start with the ostriches before we get to the Trump at the United Nations. Chris says, everybody, the ostrich situation is a distraction from Bill C-9. Yep. They're going to censor our speech. That is what they're trying to get past, and they're rushing it through. I think they're rushing it through Parliament. I think it's already in the second reading, which is fast. They want this done before Christmas, and that's scary. I hope that doesn't happen. Anti-taxer says it makes sense once you realize that we are all ostriches, right? Yes. So how are we all ostriches? Or I guess maybe that should have been the title. We are all ostriches. How are we all ostriches? You might say, Mark. We are all ostriches because I don't know if the ostriches are dead or alive, honestly. But the ostriches were waiting around to be culled. Right? They're standing around in their enclosure. Some of them are running into the fences, waiting around to be culled, but they don't know that that's the plan. They just are waiting around, but we know, waiting around to be culled. And so how are we like the ostriches? Just like that. And I don't know what the cull looks like, but free speech, central bank digital currency, digital ID, these things seem like a drastic step away from the life that we once had in the West, in Canada specifically. Darcy says supporters react as Katie and her mother are detained by police and removed. They were told that they would be allowed to feed the ostriches, but that was a ploy almost immediately after the RCMP moved in. This is a developing story, so everybody's very upset and they're yelling at the RCMP, but I don't think there's any sound on the feed.
The stream is cutting in and out, but things definitely sound like they're getting heated. I'll put the link to this stream.
And the censorship is evident as well. Here is Katie, and she explains what happened. And, well, we'll listen to a minute, I guess.
We were in the pens, and all we were asking to do was to humanely feed our animals while they prepare. We wanted to humanely feed them to keep them calm, keep them, giving them the routine, and with the familiarities, the faces that they've been used to for 35 years while they prepare. We said we were not there to obstruct, we were not there to do anything. We just wanted to feed our animals so that they got fed properly while there was going to be all these strangers and loud noises and all the fear that they're going to go through. And we sat in the pens waiting for that confirmation. We were not looking to get arrested. We were hoping that they would just come to common sense that this is one of the hardest things that this family is going through. So we were waiting to see if they came to common sense and let us feed our animals. And then we got a okay. We could go and feed our animals. And it was just this breath of like a weight off our chest that at least in all of this turmoil and chaos and anxiety and sadness and fear and tyranny and overreach and you name it that we're going through, psychological warfare, and that at least we could go feed our animals. So we went to go feed our animals, loaded up the truck, and my mom and I were crying, we're happy. And we get to the first pen. They got us away from everybody that could film. They didn't want anybody to see what was happening. And there was a bunch of police cruisers and their paddy wagon that surrounded our farm truck and told us that we were under arrest and that we were being taken away and we were not allowed to feed our animals. So psychological warfare, torment, torture, complete disrespect of any humane actions for these animals that are going to be tortured and go through one of the worst heinous crimes in Canadian history.
So there you go. Very upset. And yeah, I mean, no need to be cruel to the birds, right? Michelle Ferrari says, I hope everyone knows the Liberal minister responsible for CFIA is Heath MacDonald. Where is he? This should never have escalated to this. These ostriches are symbolic of a broken government. Yeah, she's the only CPC person or conservative person I see speaking out against this. I haven't seen anybody else. And Viva Frei was saying, listen, like these conservatives, quote conservatives, are betraying themselves as liberals. And it seems like they're behaving as liberals. It seems very, very strange. They're behaving like Carney or Biden or any of the rest. Here's H.W. Hessler, and he says, a government with the power and will to destroy perfectly healthy, privately owned livestock is a government capable of any atrocity, right? It's dangerous to be right when the government is wrong. Voltaire quote there. So that's interesting. And the ostrich situation is spiraling out of control. And I hope, again, that we're able to chart a way through this that is, well, that's able to see sanity prevail. Because, you know, I guess like, when I think of people who live in countries that seem very draconian or very foreign to me, I think that maybe they don't know other ways of living, or you know they don't realize that they could stop it or whatever. I don't know. There's got to be some kind of justification for that country continuing that way, even with the flaws, like North Korea, right? Like if they don't have enough food and they're kind of starving and stuff, but they think like Kim Jong-un is, or Kim Jong-un, whichever one it is right now, is a great golfer and, you know, really great leader, except for all this starvation. It just, those two things don't sit right with me. So I think, how does that find a balance, right? And is it the people are apathetic? Is it the people are like too brainwashed, so dangerous to speak out? All these things kind of culminate, and it feels like we're slipping into that. We can't have a conversation. And man, I'm reading The Naked Communist, and I think there's a link in here somewhere at the end of the show. I think there's a link like at the very end of my tab series. And The Naked Communist talks about how the goal of Marx was to have men who would, or society, people in society, who would respond to basically programming and become violent at will and protect the Marxist tenets, basically, and tear down anything else. And listening to it, I'm only the first chapter in. It's an 8-hour audiobook. I'm just listening on YouTube. But the first chapter in is eye-opening already, and I think to myself, wow, like they're really doing this. They're really, really doing this, and that's concerning. It's worth, just for insight into how deep-seated this plan really is, like the book was written in the 50s. So, and it is speaking about now and worse. And wild. It's absolutely wild. Okay, Trump at the UN. Concerned Citizen says the United Nations is now effectively controlled by Islamic countries and their views aren't compatible with ours. And Trump says, I ended 7 wars. I never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering help. So what is it that you would say you do here? Now, before Trump got there, they tried to humiliate him. Last week, the New York Times said to mark Trump's arrival, United Nations staff members have joked that they may turn off the escalators and elevators and simply tell them that they ran out of money, so he has to walk up the stairs. And they they actually did that. So here's Trump coming in. Sorry, it's a little loud. Coming in and then going to the escalator. And as soon as he hits the escalator, it stops. Melania, I love the look around. She's like, what in the heck? And so then they start walking up the stairs. I guess I'll show that. They start walking up the stairs. Right? So maybe they were trying to induce a Biden-like moment. And here is Donald Trump at the beginning of his UN speech. And he says, listen, I don't mind doing this without a teleprompter because the teleprompter doesn't work. This is not an accident. The escalator and the teleprompter not working, not a mistake. Not a mistake by any stretch of the imagination. Here's Trump.
I don't mind making this speech without a teleprompter because the teleprompter is not working. I feel very happy to be up here with you nevertheless, and that way you speak more from the heart. I can only say that whoever's operating this teleprompter is in big trouble. Don't mind.
So there you go. Trump is not happy, right? Not happy about this. And then he starts his speech and he goes off on the United Nations about his accomplishments and then says, you guys didn't even call me? Nothing? No phone call?
The Congo and Rwanda, a vicious, violent war that was. Pakistan and India. Israel and Iran, Egypt and Ethiopia, and Armenia and Azerbaijan. It included all of them. No president or prime minister, and for that matter, no other country has ever done anything close to that. And I did it in just 7 months. It's never happened before. There's never been anything like that. I'm very honored to have done it. It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. And sadly, in all cases, the United Nations did not even try to help in any of them. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen. But she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the 2 things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. Thank you very much.
Trump out. So that's interesting. We've got to talk about energy as well. And Trump has a lot to say from the United Nations about energy, but I had to break it out because I just wanted to stay succinct about what's going on with the United Nations and Trump. Eric says, holy cow, President Trump just went berserk at the United Nations funding mass migration. So in addition to Trump ending 7 wars, he says, how come the United Nations is funding an invasion into our sovereign country? Why would you give people who are invading our country debit cards? Why would you fund these things? You're supposed to stop these things.
Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the #1 political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration. It's uncontrolled. Your countries are being ruined. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders. In 2024, the UN budgeted $372 million in cash assistance to support an estimated 624,000 migrants journeying into the United States. Think of that. The UN is supporting people that are illegally coming into the United States, and then we have to get them out. The UN also provided food, shelter, transportation, and debit cards to illegal aliens. Can you believe that? On the way to infiltrate our southern border. Millions of people came through that southern border. Just a year ago, millions and millions of people were pouring in, 25 million altogether over the 4 years of the incompetent Biden administration. And now we have it stopped, totally stopped. In fact, they're not even coming anymore because they know they can't get through. But what took place is totally unacceptable. The UN is supposed to stop invasions, not create them and not finance them. In the United States, we reject the idea that mass numbers of people from foreign lands can be permitted to travel halfway around the world, trample our borders, violate our sovereignty, cause unmitigated crime, and deplete our social safety net.
Right. And I don't think that Mr. Trump is wrong at all, right? Here is Wall Street Mav. He says, Trump's escalator stopped as soon as he stepped into it. Then his teleprompter goes out when he starts his speech. No way those were accidents. I bet the United Nations staff, which wouldn't have jobs without our taxes, conspired to embarrass Trump. This is him talking about doing the speech without the teleprompter. Here is the White House. It says the entire globalist concept of asking successful industrialized nations to inflict pain on themselves and radically disrupt their entire societies must be rejected completely and totally, says President Trump. Yep, I agree with that as well. Here is global news. And in the spirit of all this, Canada pledges $60 million to help Haiti fight back brazen criminal gangs, with most of the funding contingent on the United Nations supporting an American plan to expand a police mission into a gang suppression force. Now, I asked ChatGPT to explain to me what happened to barbecue. I said, what's going on with barbecue? Does he still have control of the airport? And the ChatGPT said, barbecue never had control of the airport, Mark. And I said, okay, fair enough. Is the airport accepting international flights from anywhere? And it said, no, it's just being used as a regional airport with some flights coming in internationally, but no flights from certain areas like the United States because of embargoes and other reasons that they're not coming in from the United States. But it is receiving goods from somewhere, but I don't know where exactly. I can't remember the details. And so I said, okay, so who's in charge of Haiti? And ChatGPT said a council of 7 people or something like that are in charge of Haiti. And I said, is that leadership group in Haiti physically? Do they have a place in Haiti where their supporters and themselves govern from? That's complicated. And I said, who governs I think it's Port-au-Prince. The capital city of Haiti. Who governs that? Barbecue. I was like, okay, all right. So barbecue is still in charge. Ish. His gang, Barbecue's gang, right? Barbecue's the bad guy. He's a bad guy and he runs the gang. And Canada, we I think went down there a little while ago to fix this up, right? And to hand it over to the globalists who pretend that they're running Haiti. But Barbecue's like, no, I'm not going to have any of this. So Barbecue, and then there's another gang that is kind of like working with Barbecue, and they're in charge of most of the main capital areas of Haiti. And so I don't think that Canada's $60 million is going to change that at all. Like, I think that that's a fool's errand. I think that's the same as this Iraq war is going to end this weekend type deal. No. Nope. So I just think it's foolish. Canada puts more resources into foreigners, foreign countries, etc., than it puts into itself. And I think that it's a very, very strange thing. And the United Nations is trying to return Haiti to the control of the United Nations. It doesn't want them self-governing. And that's my worry. Greg and I, we had a conversation yesterday. I've tried to post it on most of I've got it on Substack. I think I've got it on Spotify, and I've got it on CanadaPoly.com. So you should all, and Locals too, I think I've got it up there as well. If not, I'll post. I don't think I have it on Locals actually. But Greg and I were talking about the 3 tiers. And if we don't attack the top tier, we're not going to actually change anything. The United Nations is part of that top tier. And they're trying to, if we attack that top tier and make Canada have a leadership that represents its citizens, then we will be attacked by the international world order. And they'll say, oh yeah, well, Canada's under the boot heel of authoritarians like Trump. Canada's under the boot heel of gangs, right? Oh, those crazy, Canadian maple syrup drinking gangs. They've taken over the country of Canada, and we've got to really get it back under United Nations control, that rule-based order that we love so much. And their rule-based order is bullshit, right? But it's a globalist plan. But my worry is this is the kind of rhetoric that they would use against any country that stands up and has its own governance. And I'm using this as an analogy, right? There is an analogy here. I'm not saying barbecue is a stand-up guy who's trying to run his country. He might be. I don't know enough about him. But it seems like what's happening here is the United Nations doesn't like this group of citizens from Haiti who have risen up and said, we're not dealing with this anymore. We're gonna govern our own way. Sure, it may be a gang warfare, but it's their country to do with what they want. And the United Nations stepping in. I feel like that's going to happen anywhere, and they'll label them gangs, they'll label them terrorists, they'll label them authoritarians, etc., just to make sure that the general public, using that language, and the AIs, using that language, the public will default to the side of the globalists because they'll say this is a reasonable position, not knowing enough, right? So I hope my analogy makes sense. Chris is responding. Let's talk about free speech. Oh man, I've got to say goodbye. Free speech. This is a crazy one. Google admits, here's the too long didn't read, okay? Google just admitted censorship program under the Biden administration, okay? Google was being subject to massive antitrust action by the Biden administration, so they could have gone public with all of this to undermine the Biden administration's case against them, but they didn't. They didn't come clean until long after Trump won. They were fine with all of this until Trump won. They were fine with being an arm of the Democratic Party until the Democrat Party lost the election. Right. And so Doug says Google paid a high-powered law firm to put out an expensive press release generating tons of good publicity for itself. I'm not going to believe Google is going to change a damn thing until I actually see it with my own two eyes. So Google is promising to restore YouTube channels that were removed from creators. But as I said at the top of the show today, my YouTube is still very, very censored. I don't grow. I only lose subscribers on my YouTube channel, which is hilarious. Like, okay, guys, you're going to give me my YouTube channel back to destroy it, to just like run it into the ground? Okay. But like my subscriptions on my website are increasing. So, okay, like you want to take away YouTube. I know it's censorship. I know I put out a good product. So it's weird. Anyway, if you want the whole product, if you want the whole show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. And if not,